I, Daniel Blake may be the title, but Ken Loach is the source of this film. In 2016, the director won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival for I, Daniel Blake. This is a classic Ken Loach social commentary, or more appropriately, Ken Loach shout, yell, scream to the world, might be a more accurate way of putting it.
Now you can go back to your desk and let us sign on and do the job that the taxpayer pays you for. This is a bloody disgrace.
Taking on the struggles of the working classes and underclasses who are let down by society, especially by government.
And there is a conscious cruelty in the way we're organising our lives now, where the most vulnerable people are told that their poverty is their own fault. If you have no work, it's your fault you haven't got a job. So they know this is going on. And it's not just a few, it's tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and across Europe, it's massive. So it is deeply shocking that this is happening at the heart of our world.
We have a 59-year-old carpenter and widower in Newcastle, England, played by Doug Johns. In real life, Johns is a stand-up comedian from the very neighborhood where the filming took place in Newcastle.
Yeah, look, you just get it back. Come back here and really clean that up.
Will you?
Yeah, I'll come and shite in your garden, shall I?
Shut up.
Hello?
This character is recovering from a heart attack while fighting for assistance that he's legally and morally due. This is very important. Like all of Loach's work, this is at once an angry assault on a bureaucracy, as Loach puts you in an observer's seat that sees people treated as case numbers to be filed and shuffled on.
Rules that we have to stick to, okay? It isn't against you, but you have a duty.
Listen, I'm not saying it's against
me.
me.
You have
All
a
I'm
duty
saying
to
is,
be here on time.
and I'm explaining to you why I wasn't here on time.
The words dignity and respect start creeping into our minds and into our critical consciousness. Human compassion and obvious cracks in the system, the queues of people lining up for government assistance makes us shift in our seats. This is a dreadful feeling. Loach is often labeled a social realist, but he refuses to pigeonhole himself. He's renowned for his irreverent depictions of the politics in everyday life in England. His irreverent movies have at times, in his 80 years, been banned, deplored in the Parliament, and ignored. They have also won multiple awards, caused change in laws, and made him the undisputed warrior of the common man. Hollywood is not in his vocabulary.
One of the biggest questions that we talked about at the very beginning, like who would be the main characters and how we would pitch this story, because after travelling the country, in Scotland and all the way down to England, travelling around food banks, listening to people's stories, working to welfare rights organisations, disabled groups, what was remarkable was how many of the most vulnerable people were the ones who bore the brunt of it. Now, in this particular story, Dan is actually a very competent man who has a life of work, who's got friends, who's smart, intelligent. He's had a very, very full life. But what really amazed us was talking to experts in different sections of the community, people who work with mental health. The stories we heard about that were just break your heart.
Loach shares a place at the dinner table with the Dardenne brothers. He has been at it longer. He may be more brutal, more searing, but the message is similar. I, Daniel Blake, and all his films are shot in similar fashion to the Dardennes. Each scene is shot in sequence with a mix of professional actors and non-actors. He shoots from a script, but is not averse to using improvised scenes if they carry his story along. The Dardennes write their own movies, but Loach always uses a writer, and it's the same writer, Paul Laverty. Since his original writer that he started out with long ago passed on, Laverty has been the only writer that he's worked with. And Laverty has acquitted himself well. His words are strong, simple, and clear.
Frightened and poor and nervous and jumping hoops, You know, they'll accept any job, and many of them are accepting terrible 0-hour contracts, and we could give you tons of stories of the chaos it created in people's lives. And also people who got into work were not joining trade unions. And even the people inside the DWP, they were very aware if they joined their trade union or became a spokesperson for their trade union, they would not be promoted. So there's a whole project of fear and punishment.
Let's look at working people, he says. Let's look at people as they really struggle with politics, with private life, matters of dignity, and with humility. This movie is like a scream at all the catch-22s of the world. The loss of the safety net in Britain. Some would say the welfare state. We follow Dan, a 59-year-old carpenter, swallowed by a new way of living in the world. Perhaps the most discussed scene in the film is the food bank sequence. This is Ken Loach at his best. The viewer is wrung out with empathy for the young woman who is shouldering just too much. This scene encapsulates Loach's philosophy of life. Not that we are our brother's keeper, but that we must pay attention, almost Arthur Miller-like. Of course, he is a very right-wing director, but he labors to deliver the message that empathy should be the basis of our programs and our attitudes.
We knew that we couldn't go into that without a real sense of hunger and everything that hunger does to you, stress, tiredness, the kind of disconnect between your mind and your body, and what that does to your adrenaline and your emotions. And yeah, I worked with Shelter, the UK homeless charity, who do amazing work. They do really great work legally as well, with women and men in these circumstances who need to know their rights. They help them in court and so on, and they put me in touch with two brilliant women who let me into their homes and meet their children. And
many felt that the film was chiefly dealing with the exposure of the ruthless and the premeditated disenfranchisement of citizens from their rights. And these rights are fully theirs. Blake is entitled to definite benefits, but by imposing confusion, skullduggery, and outright deception, people are bypassed and money is saved for the system. Social workers in these offices were actually rewarded for saving money. And the film delivers this message very clearly. But here's another overriding message of redundancy and the non-profitability of aging workers, younger people, especially mothers with children, that just shocks you as you watch. The two cases that the film follows are Dan and Katie, a mother who's been moved to a vacant apartment many miles from London where her entire support system remains. This raises the question, how important are people that we count on to our well-being in our lives? Who is valuable? Who's worthless? Is there a system that would work more equitably? Always coming to my mind are the Scandinavian countries that reportedly function so much more humanely than what we're witnessing in Britain and in our own country. This ubiquitous question, how should we live? Moral questions, ethical questions that continually haunt us. The final and exalting cathartic scene of Dan with his spray can and the cheers coming from the crowd is certainly a release for all. When his name goes up on the wall.
I am Daniel Blake, yes.
Hey, this is Daniel Blake!
This has been a painful journey to go on with these characters, and Ken Loach has refused to spare us. This is what film can do, and it can be truly meaningful. Things are up for discussion and some thought and comparison. There are too many Daniel Blakes and Katies in our world.